Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Lowell. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Lowell, and I'm in the Learning Design and Technology program here at Purdue. I teach there and have been in that department for 13 years.
I'm Stuart White. I teach biology for elementary educators through biology group, and I'm also a PhD student in learning design technology.
So I run a group with our college called Emerging Technologies, Learning Design and Technology. And my goal for this group has been one that I think I've been working towards for several decades now. So back in the mid-2000s, I got my first position at a college as an instructional designer. And my work there opened my eyes to a lot of the challenges that I had not seen when I was a teacher in middle schools and high schools prior to having that position, because I was working with faculty. And working with faculty, I realized that they were trying to solve problems, real critical problems with what they were doing with their teaching, and their students were struggling with some concepts. So what I decided to do was look at some different ways that we could teach students besides just the traditional ways that we were doing that. And it opened my eyes to emerging technologies such as VR, which at that time was really starting to break into education. And then we had the downward economy in the late 2000s, which kind of stopped it for a little bit. And then it's kind of come up again, and AR has joined that. And now we see XR with VR, AR, and MR. So when I came to Purdue, I focused a lot of my work on still trying to create authentic experiential learning experiences with active learning and situated learning activities that would allow students to develop skills that they could carry from their classes to their jobs when they actually graduate. So, we think sometimes our students are just here to learn in our classrooms, but they have to take those skills and take them somewhere. And as teachers, all of you know, I'm speaking to the choir here, we're all struggling to try to help them develop those skills and that knowledge, and we're trying to figure out better ways to do that. So that's where these tools can come in and really help us. So our group is including graduate students, but also faculty and staff. So you see George is here too. I consider him part of our group because he's certainly part of our collaborative group in what we do and try to accomplish here in our classes and in the work that we do as a research group and a teaching group on campus. So some of the projects that we focus on are teaching and learning at Purdue through engagements and also through external schools and organizations. So we're trying to solve problems from a perspective of how do we teach and train better? How do we improve our product? How do we improve our tool in what we're trying to do? And how do we do that in a way that is engaging to our students, but feasible to a teacher, feasible to an instructor? How can they do this and they can actually fit this into all the other things that they have going on? So we focus on teaching and learning goals and integrating those technologies with what's already needing to be accomplished. Our projects mainly include VR, AR, MR, and AI. We do have some other tools that we use, and we collaborate with other groups on campus, like the Envision Center, because there's some things that we really don't want to focus on as our main focus area, and the Envision Center is a great resource for us when we want to have things developed or created that maybe that's something that's a little bit out of our wheelhouse. The first of the projects I want to talk about is a project that we did collaborate with the Envision Center to create some content for us that really was a wonderful start to a project that is now occurring here at Purdue in middle schools and in high schools, hopefully within the next year.
We had the concept of just background here. In biology, one of the topics that you teach is taxonomy, classification, that sort of thing. And so we thought that in teaching this, if we wanted to teach it in a way that would be more authentic to the learning experience, so going out and actually identifying objects, normally this is done with just 2D objects. What if we created 3D objects of these insects and then use that as our tool as opposed to a piece of paper with just an image of a bug on it, for example, and see if they can learn the classification process. So what we did is we conceptualized this, that we would go and create these insect models, and then we would incorporate these into the classroom, and we'd study them that way. And one of the things we quickly found out was this process from the instructional design side of things was going to be extremely challenging. And this is where we partnered with Envision Center in order to accomplish that task. So we had the idea of what we wanted, and then we went to the Envision Center and said, here's our concept of the the thing we want to talk about. We want to create these 6 insects. How can we do that? And so they helped us with that process, taking them through that. And so that's what you're seeing here as the artists were doing the renderings of those 3D insects and those 3D models. We then took those 3D images and we created QR codes that the students could then access, bring that object into the classroom, and then go through the process of using a dichotomous key to identify each one of those insects, just as if they were identifying those insects as just a 2D object on a piece of paper.
So just a few more images of what the Envision Center created for us. So some of the things that we do, as I mentioned again, is we focus on the pedagogy. We really focus on what are we trying to accomplish and how do we help students who are wanting to do these things in their own classrooms or with other people when they graduate. How do we help them to focus on what their area is and then get other people to help us with things that maybe we don't have the time to develop. So they created these amazing insects for us that we were using with the students in the classes, including the classes that Stu runs here in the College of Science at Purdue University. So he has 6 or 7 classes that run each fall and each spring, and we're able to integrate these into some of the lessons that we're using there. It allows the students, if you can see from the images here at the bottom, to look through a viewer, perhaps a phone or an iPad, at the insects, and then they can manipulate the insects so they can look at them from different angles, get close to them, see the details. Much harder to do in the traditional way of looking at 2D images on a book or on a worksheet. They can now see them through these AR models that were created.
And one of the really cool things about it was that we could now have the dichotomous key be more specific, like talk about it has this object on it, or it's this sort of thing, where generally those are pretty basic, broad statements. We could refine those dichotomous keys down to more specific things that they actually had to go and search and had to go and find as they looked at that insect.
So that brought in the critical thinking aspect that we've got into our conversations about of, you know, when you had done the lessons before, it was more of just classifying these insects and what they fit into in this taxonomy, but now they really had to think about at a much deeper level and really observe, why does this insect have a leg that's shaped like that, or why does it have an antenna like that, and go deeper into that thinking process.
Exactly, yeah. And then, so that allows us to do other things as from the teacher side of things, expand the concept of the dichotomous key and the insects into other aspects of the curriculum that we're teaching throughout the entire semester. So it's not just an isolated experience to the students, it becomes something that's repeated or referred back to multiple times throughout the course.
So I'm gonna just talk for a second. Now we're doing this here in the undergraduate classrooms at Purdue. Now these are pre-elementary education teachers. So these are teachers that are going to teach elementary ed when they graduate. And if you're not familiar with what that means, it means that they're going to be teaching multiple subjects in one classroom. They have to be a science teacher, an English teacher, a math teacher, a history teacher, all at once. And science is one of the subjects that they're actually the most fearful in teaching. They fear the idea of having to teach something they're not as familiar with. So by integrating this into the pre-elementary teacher classes, we're hoping to engage them in the subject and excite them about teaching this subject. Then we branch this out. Right now we have this going in middle schools in northern Indiana. We have 4 middle schools where this is being worked on by teachers, and they are integrating it into their lessons also. And then because of what we've been doing here, we're moving this into the VR space also, where we don't just have one lesson where we're using AR. We have a couple lessons with AR, and then we're also using VR as an environment where the students can go in and interact with the same insects, but they're doing it in an environment that the insects would live in, and they have to understand why they're living in this environment, what things might occur in this environment that could potentially impact the insects that might actually harm them or make them change in a way that we might not want them to change.
And so that was one of the things that when we were collaborating with Envision Center, that we actually talked about. We wanted these insects to do more than just be a static image. We wanted them to be created in a way that eventually they could be manipulated and have animation added to it, so we can put them in other situations. So it wasn't just to create this insect as an image and then use it this one time, but create this insect as something that we can expand upon and build upon and make more robust as a learning tool.
And one of the fun things that's happened because of that was I had a scholar that came from Germany and visited me last semester for the entire semester. And his work is allowing us to continue to branch us out a little bit further with VR. And he created the initial environment, and we're going to go forth with that and hopefully develop it further. And we can integrate that in the undergrad, middle school, and we're looking at the high schools too. Some other projects we work on is in the area of language learning research. Language learning can be very challenging. If you're a language instructor, I'm again speaking to the choir, you know that authentic learning experiences are incredibly important for students to truly understand how to interact with another person through communication ways. So having those opportunities in authentic situations, so situational learning opportunities, are very important. So this particular set of images is from a technology called Immerse VR. And although it doesn't look very realistic, the research I've been doing over the last 20 years has found that not every VR experience has to be extremely high fidelity. And in fact, that can actually impact the cognitive load of the student, and they might not learn as well if it's too high of fidelity. So for language learning, high fidelity is not required. It's more about the situation that they're involved in and that activity that they're involved in that's going to improve their learning. So you'll see that there's 3 different images here. In each of these are different situations that a learner might find themselves in when they're trying to learn a language, or if they go to another country and they're immersed in that language population. They might be in a classroom, they might be at a restaurant, they might be at another location, and they practice activities where they have to be able to think on the spot, on their feet, how do I say what I need to say, and practice their speech simulations. And then one of the other projects we did this year, we have many, but this is one that is close to my heart, is really reaching out and helping faculty, teachers, and those who are supporting our teachers, the staff here on campus who are instructional support staff, and doing what they want to do best, which is teach our students and then do research on what they're doing. So Stu and our entire group worked together to put together a professional development series, and we asked George if he would join us, and he was really great and has been just an amazing collaborator in this series. His expertise on some of the technology we were using and access to the technologies before we even got started was extremely helpful, and then just his work throughout the entire series we were really grateful for. But let me walk you through what we did with these workshops. We started working on this last spring. It took us a full 4 months of just crazy planning to run this series, get it set up, and then run it in the fall. We had 3 workshops that we did. Introduction to XR technology, we had a hands-on interactive learning experience, and then a showcase of speakers. So the events themselves had very specific purposes. The first event, we really looked at helping people to understand what are these technologies, what are the differences between them, and why might you use one technology compared to another. One of the things I've found over the years is that we tend to gravitate towards the shiny new tool. So that new headset that is just come out might be the one you might want to be interested in using. However, that's not always the best tool for you to use for what you want to actually accomplish in your teaching and in your students' learning experiences. Even in our group, when we were looking at what we wanted to do with the science classes, the students first came in and, VR, 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 but it wound up that AR was actually the better option for what we wanted to accomplish. So really looking at the information that our folks needed to know, and we had folks that came in, I see some very familiar faces here of different levels of experiences. Some had some experience with using the tools, some had even tried it in their classroom, and then others had no experience at all, but they knew that they were trying to solve a problem, a real critical issue with what they were trying to help their students to learn. So that first workshop was a couple hours long. Our second workshop was a very hands-on experience, and we brought in a ton of different technologies for all of our attendees to touch, feel, put on, try, interact with, and really get an idea about whether or not this would work for what they were thinking about, and to talk with us about what they were trying to accomplish. So that second experience was throughout a day in November, and then our last event was in December, and we had a showcase of many speakers, 6 speakers in all, that came in and talked about how are they actually using them in their classroom. What was the problem they were trying to solve? and then how they went about their selection of the technology that they chose to do, how they integrated it specifically in their classes, and then how their students responded to the teaching. So has it been successful? What is the performance objective that you had, and did you actually meet that objective? So these are just some of the pictures that we had. We really focused a lot of our time on both information, providing access to technologies for experiencing, but a lot of discussions. So in between a lot of our sessions, there was opportunities to talk. What are you trying to accomplish? You know, what are you thinking you might want to do? And I think that was part of what was successful about this, is that we allowed our attendees to be able to think through what are they trying to do by coming to this workshop series in the first place. Some additional images here from our introduction, and then our interactive activities. A lot of the activities that we had there were focused either in the area of VR or AR. We did have some MR opportunities, but the main two areas was VR and AR technologies, and we did not have the Quest 3 headsets at that time because they were still coming out when we first planned this, and then I think they were coming in right about the time that we had that event.
One of the other things we had there was 3D cameras as well. So we showcased some of that other technology that lets you do the VR and the AR sorts of things as well.
So I don't think I have any of the 360 cameras on here. Unfortunately, when you look at a 360 camera, you're kind of looking at the camera unless there's something created with it. It's harder to, other than helping them to see how the tool might be used and show them some examples, harder for our imagery. But a lot of interest in that hands-on activity. And then our showcase of the speakers, many speakers there, including Danny's presentation that was done by George, and then Kara Weatherman, and then Fareed, who's always been a joy to work with here. He came in and talked about his research in the area of complex systems.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I have one. So what is it like to deploy for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and how's that process going?
Oh my goodness. From a perspective of teaching, I think that it's no different than a lot of other classrooms, whether you're higher education or higher, high school. You've got to fit it into what the students are already learning with the lesson plans, or figure out if it's going to be something completely outside the classroom. In our case, just like we were doing with the classes here at Purdue, we needed to solve an issue that was already occurring with what the students need to learn with taxonomy in their classes. So we worked with teachers. We went right to the source and asked them what challenges are you having, what issues in particular could we help you to solve. And that's actually how this started with when we talked to the teachers at both undergraduate and at middle school. We found that there were similar problems in both areas. So we know it's happening in the high schools too. And they helped us to realize from their perspective, how could we make this feasible for them to do, which is key if you want them to continue using this tool, how could we make it feasible? And then number two, we wanted to make sure the technology was going to be accessible to the students when they went home, or when we left, could they still access what we had created? So we looked at it from that perspective. We trained the teachers, so students
so
how to use
from
it.
from that instructional design kind of perspective, it has to be very detailed out because you're working with high school teachers who are very unfamiliar with it, but are very used to regimented sorts of processes. So regimenting it out, saying, okay, here's the steps that you're going to go through for each one of those things. And then just having the resources that are very easily to access. It can't be a complicated process, like a QR code was really quick and easy for them to access, that sort of thing. So it's something that makes it easy for the students to access it, but then also makes it feasible for the teachers to regimentedly make it go through the step process. It has to be very well thought out and organized from that perspective.
I'll put it this way. I know that you're working with WICU to do this in a research perspective and within his classes, so he's familiar with it and he knows what you want to do and you know what you want to do, so that's a little bit easier. But in our case, we're working with teachers that want to solve an issue, but they're not as familiar with the technologies and they're not as familiar with what we want to do with creating it. So we had to front end a lot of this and provide some training and provide some resources and really show them, okay, this is how you could teach this in your classroom. Work with us, collaborate with us, and let us make this feasible for you. And then tell us afterwards, what worked and didn't work, so we can improve it and then, try it again.
In something like the foreign language instructions, how are you getting the audio? I mean, is it the teachers that are is it audio or is it completely text-based? Or if it is audio, then are the teachers voicing it over? Or?
So it depends on which technologies we're using for the activities. In all of the activities we've been using so far, it's been VR. Some of it is web-based and some of it is headset. Either way, you're gonna have audio coming through either your computer or the headset itself. So.
I suppose I mean, like, do you need voice actors to actually do the foreign language immersive experience?
All right, so these have all been with formal teaching. So we actually have teachers or upper graduate students that are TAing coming in there, and they're able to provide the activities and then the interactions with Immerse. Immerse is an actual off-the-shelf tool. Immerse Me is another one we're going to be working with too, and there is some actors within these tools that will do some of those voice interaction activities you're talking about. And I know what you're talking about because when I did a study back in, gosh, it was 20 years ago, I ran into this, and this is when I wanted AI so badly, and we're getting there now with AI. I built an entire environment for doing therapy counseling sessions where we could help people who want to be counselors or psychologists learn how to do a therapy session. So you're talking about a knowledge skill. I need to learn how to do this. I need to know how to do this, but I need to be able to perform the psychomotor skills of whatever it is I need to do while I'm doing that, including taking notes to make a diagnosis of my patient. When you set up this kind of simulations and those kind of scenarios, you have to have somebody that's acting as the patient in order for the student to be able to interact with them. So in that case, we got an upperclassman that played one part, and we got a licensed counselor to come in and play the other. So yes, I know what you're talking about. We wanted, and we are now at the point where we are able to have AI bots that are much better than the ones that came out 50 years ago when they first started with counseling. You could have this generative AI that can respond and learn from these interactions.
So for the situational language example, are those used as a practice to learn in those situations, or are they used as assessment scenario?
Both. They're used as both. They give opportunities for the students to be able to practice their speaking, but in some cases when they've done some of these scenarios multiple times, you can then get to the point where you can assess them. Are they able to respond in a conversational manner? So one of our research studies is actually looking at conversational English. So there's a difference between conversational English and speaking from a speech point of view. With a speech, you can be practicing and you know what your speech is going to be and you can talk. But when I'm talking with you at a conversation, there's a give and take, and there's an ability to respond within a certain period of time. There's a process of thinking that has to occur, and then the linguistic ability to speak and speak correctly when you're talking. So by the time you've done a scenario a couple times, you've had multiple opportunities to practice. Yes, there's assessment occurring at that point.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.